This was for public health. Is the overriding goal.
The meme of public health.
The meme of public health. And the people the people who oppose this are Nazis. And so we'll just go through the results, because the results are now coming in about what happens when you forcibly lock a country down. And it's not good. It's really not good. So first of all, we'll start with the Johns Hopkins study that we've covered before. That's just, according to the study, lockdowns have had little to no effect on COVID-19 mortality in the US and Europe, and only reduced COVID-19 mortality by 0.2% on average. Right. So.
Nothing.
Barely measurable. And they do say that the intervention may have had some effect on reducing COVID-19 mortality by closing of non-essential businesses like bars and things like that, as in people getting drunk and dying when they're drunk.
Right, so the net positives are 0.
Yeah.
They're all 0.
So let's get to the damage. So let's begin with the economic damage, which is the least of the damage in my opinion. This obviously the impact of this has varied greatly from industry to industry. Sectors that this is just the Wikipedia page. There's a huge Wikipedia page. It's very, very well sourced on this. As you can just like scroll down just to keep going, John, because you'll see all of the different areas in which, like, you know, everything was ruined basically. But, you know, the sectors that rely heavily on physical presence, including passenger transportation, the arts, entertainment, tourism, and hospitality were impacted the worst, with declines of up to 30% in the second quarter of 2020 compared to the first quarter. Various other industries, obviously, just is full spectrum basically. Everywhere was screwed, apart from very certain key points, which we'll talk about in a minute. And in 2020, Yelp, when the first lockdowns came in, it became apparent to Yelp, a business aggregating site basically, that 60% of restaurants will never reopen. So many of these closures are permanent, not going to come back. And so that meant that the rich got richer and the poor got screwed, as Real Clear Politics told us. This, again, Real Clear Politics, not some sort of right-wing libertarian think tank or something, but this is just from this analysis here. Shutting down the economy hurt the poor most and vastly widened the chasm between rich and poor. Lockdowns squashed small startup businesses, hurt low-income workers whose jobs are first in line to be destroyed, and devastated educational advances of children in the worst school districts. We'll talk about that in a minute. We learned that big businesses scored a $1.4 trillion payday during the pandemic. Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google and Microsoft released their profits, increased their profits by 45% last year. Would you like almost half of what you're making on top of what you're already making? Yeah, I'd love that. Thanks very much. Great. All we have to do is screw the regular people of the country. You're welcome. From the front page of the New York Times, wealth inequality is the highest since World War II. George Soros, Bill Gates, and Warren Buffett won the lottery. If any good comes out of COVID-19, it should be that we've learned this lesson the hard way, and never, never again should we allow politicians to impose these unconstitutional lockdown orders again. I agree. And what happens in the West makes the rest of the world follow, because the West is an influential place. And so, as Vox points out, this hurt poor countries worse than it hurt us. In most high-income countries, stay-at-home orders have been a cornerstone of the coronavirus response, but this one-size-fits-all approach doesn't necessarily fit well with the needs of the developing world. And you got some really quite horrible stories. I mean, like, the rest of the world is a lot more rough than we are. You know, they're like in Nigeria, 18 people have been killed by security forces for violating lockdowns, things like that. But basically things got a lot worse. I'm just going to skip over a lot of it because it's quite grim, to be honest. But yeah, so we influenced these countries to lock down, and a bunch of people are dead and their economies are ruined because of that policy. Okay. And so how has this affected our own population? Well, the health secretary has said that the levels of depressions among adults has nearly doubled since the pandemic began. Brilliant. Among the most worrying consequences of the coronavirus lockdowns has been a rise in mental health problems. In November last year, the health secretary said that levels of depression among adults had nearly doubled since the pandemic began. Young people have also been badly affected, with most studies showing that children's mental health has worsened. Good news. Also, the GPs are taking fewer referrals for therapy and things like that. Don't know why.
So early signs of trying to get them help also not going to happen.
Yes, down by a third. So 30% of people who need help are not going to get the help. And of course, drug overdosing increased during the lockdowns. If you can scroll down a bit, you can see a tweet that's in there that really just sums up from the NCHS. Right. Stat of the day. Over 93,000 Americans died of a drug overdose in 2020, up nearly 30% from 2019. Got nothing to do? In your house all day? May as well take some drugs. What else are you going to do with your day? In May 2021, The Lancet released a analysis suggesting that they didn't find any statistical increase in the amounts of suicide. They say, quote, "We did not find a rise in suicide rates in England in the months after the first national lockdown began in 2020, despite evidence of greater distress. However, a number of caveats apply. These early figures may change. Any effect of the pandemic may vary by population group or geographical area." So basically, they've got nothing with the initial data, but the thing is, I couldn't find any update on this. So this is the latest thing I could find on England in particular, but elsewhere, we do have data. For example, the Center for Disease Control in America recently released a study that showed female adolescents from 12 through 17 had visited the emergency department for suicide attempts between February and March 2021 at a nearly 51% higher rate compared to 2019 in the same time frame before the lockdowns. So 50% increase in young women or young girls trying to kill themselves. Nothing to see here. Data from the Netherlands has come out as well, which is not good. Suicides rose significantly among Dutch people up to the age of 30 last year. So young Dutch people committing suicide, particularly during the lockdown months of January, February, and December. The new figures that have been published show that on average, 20 young adults took their lives each month in the previous year, but then it 50% increased to 30 every month. So a 50% increase in suicides. Not good.
But not in England.
Well, we don't have the England one yet, unfortunately. But they were classed as...
I mean, what are you expecting? That's the thing.
Well, it's going to be something very similar. I mean, I don't think the English and the Dutch are so terribly dissimilar. But this was classed as statistically worrying. Yeah, it's worrying when you get a 50% increase in suicides because of government policy. But there is also increased sustained deaths, as US life insurers have made a large number of COVID-19 death benefit payouts last year. More surprisingly, many saw a jump in other death claims too. So industry executives and actuaries believe that many of these other fatalities are tied to delays in medical care as a result of lockdowns in 2020, and then later people's fear of seeking out treatment and trouble lining up appointments. And so they expect to see continued high levels of these deaths for some time, even if COVID-19 deaths decline this year. So people are going to die after the lockdowns because of the lockdowns.
Well, verifiably. I mean, the insurers
Yes.
are saying that, okay, there was a rate of deaths, and then we had COVID, it increased, now the COVID deaths are gone, but the rate of deaths is now higher than it used to be, and will stay that way for time,
Yes.
just until we don't know.
Yeah, and that's because people aren't getting operations. Because the next one, this is in Britain. Apparently, 1 in 7 patients, so after 20,000 people surveyed, 1 in 7 of them, 15%, did not receive their planned operation after almost 5.5 months from their diagnosis. And so this is not good. People not getting treated. Because apparently the hospitals are overwhelmed, even though the hospitals were never overwhelmed. Frail patients, those with advanced cancer, and those waiting for surgery in lower middle-income countries were all less likely to have the cancer operation that they urgently needed.
So it's not just that people aren't getting cancer treatment they need. The worst off are the ones not getting it.
Yes. Cancer patients are not getting life-saving operations. And so this has added to the backlog in the UK, which was 4.43 million people on a waiting list for care. This has gone up to over 6 million people waiting for treatment. Wonderful. Did we save the NHS by sacrificing ourselves?
Oh, we kind of killed the NHS with the backlog. I mean, I don't know if you can scroll down on this, John. There is a graph in here where you can just see just the effect,
Look at that.
as you can see.
Yeah, there you
Just like, it's kind of stable, going up a little bit because
Yep.
stable. And then
Population increase, that's why.
pandemic happens, it explodes up.
Yeah.
When's that going to be gone? 10 years?
Well, the backlog's just been getting bigger and bigger and bigger for the last 5 years before the pandemic.
So what do you mean? I mean, 2 years from now, do you think that's not going to be 6 million?
Well, the immigration rate is still the same, so it's going to continue.
Sure, but I know they're throwing more money at it to try and get rid of it. I don't think that's even going to affect.
They're not going to. But anyway, let's turn now to the effect on the people who are the most vulnerable in society, children. The effect that this has had on our kids, because this is where it gets really sad and really awful. There's one thing adults, dying or killing themselves and say, yep, that's tragic, but they're at least adults, they're at least fully realized. These are...
Sacrificing our children to save the NHS is...
Yes, this is where we've got to.
Right.
Sacrificing children to save the NHS. Right? So one of the most obvious problems and most immediate problems from locking children in their homes for a year is that they become fat. The number of now 40% of British children are morbidly obese.
Up from 35.
Yeah. I mean, go back to 2006, it was 30%. So not good. But like, that's wild, isn't it?
It's at least like, stable-ish,
Yeah.
and then just massive up.
Nearly half of kids are obese or overweight. It's wild. But anyway, there are worse problems than being fat, though, because at least you can lose the fat. But if you were born in the pandemic, then you're stupid and you're never going to recover from this, right? The first few years of a child's life are critical to their cognitive development, but with COVID-19 triggering the closure of businesses, nurseries, schools and playgrounds, life for infants changed considerably with their parents stressed and stretched as they tried to balance work and childcare. In the decade preceding the pandemic, the mean IQ score on standardized tests for children aged between 3 months and 3 years of age hovered around 100. But for children born during the pandemic, that number tumbled to 78, according to this analysis. 22 IQ points knocked off. My God, that is unbelievable. That is unforgivable that you are taking away so many potential futures from children here.
How long has it taken to get society up 22 IQ points?
100 years?
And it's just within 1 year.
Gone. I mean, imagine if you were born with 120 IQ, you could expect a nice academic career, maybe you'd do something really good to contribute to humanity, but you've been knocked down to 98, below average. It's disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. Anyway, and this isn't just newborns, of course, who were born in the pandemic where they couldn't socialize and learn from the people around them. I mean, I'm just saying, I've got a son who was born during the pandemic. So this particularly bothers me. He's 1 now, and to be honest with you, luckily enough, he seems quite smart. He's figuring a lot of stuff out, and so a lot of the time that's bad. But okay, I might be the one example when my child is an idiot because he was born in the pandemic, because he had siblings and whatnot, I guess. But this is just...
But didn't you have trouble with your other son, learning how to write?
Oh, yeah.
The school's closed.
Yeah. His writing was definitely delayed. Yeah,
Like this.
Absolutely. Well, so we get to slightly older children. It's not good, right? Apparently, the nation's lockdown policies created a generation of children who will exhibit lower IQs and signs of social brain damage, according to a clinical psychiatrist for children and adolescents. The masks, Zoom schools, and lockdown mandates have all led to a deprivation overall of social contact, of not being able to see faces, of being stuck at home all day long. And this has actually caused brain damage to youngsters, says Carl Hennigan, the director of Oxford University's Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine. He also says that the pandemic restrictions and the fear we instill into children has led to the worsening of psychological problems. He cited his study that concluded that 8 out of 10 children and adolescents report worsening of behaviour or any psychological symptoms and an increase in negative feelings due to the COVID-19 pandemic. School closures contributed to anxiety, loneliness and stress. Negative feelings due to COVID-19 increased with the duration of school closures. Deteriorating mental health was found to be worse in females and older adolescents. Adolescents above the age of 12 did worse than children under 12, as adolescents face increasing peer pressure and social pressure and various other problems. Right? Not good, basically. And this isn't ending after the lockdown. These effects will continue on even though the lockdowns have ended. As this study points out here, from pre to during lockdown, perceived stress, well-being, depressive symptoms, mood disturbance, and memory were all significantly worsened. There were significant improvements in self-reported physical health symptoms, social interaction, time spent with social interaction, and time spent engaging in physical activities, and aspects of engagement quality. Follow-ups shown that well-being, depression, and mood were still negatively affected post-lockdown. So these effects are going to be with us, probably at least for a couple of generations. And it's just an unbelievable tragedy for no benefit at all.
If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to subscribe and get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this video. This is a premium video, The Politics of Watchmen, which John Wheatley and Harry did together. Now, if you'd like to find out what else John's up to, you can follow him on Getter at John Wheatley on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.